All right. As usual, I gotta turn off the stream near the start of this, just so I can quickly grab the stream link, get that all sorted. So I can at people, make sure they know the stream's gonna be around. Early bird. Please become actual. There we go. Hey, there we go. Okay. Now it is time to wait on people to join. I'm not gonna watch until at least 1 or 2 people join the stream. Hi, Tepig. Welcome. So this is Tom's first game theory. That's on FNaF, really. I know he did a short that was on FNaF. Oh, that would have been a way better thumbnail title. Tom's first game theory. God, I went for like the generic safe one. Hi everyone. Welcome Veronica. Welcome me. Welcome Clover. Welcome JJ Robotnik. Welcome Wolfgang. Welcome Tesco. Welcome Tyler Brown. Welcome Blaze Ryder. Welcome John the Square or Jan the Square. I mean, that can be either. Or Squire. Hello, Fred Naff. I don't know how long this stream's going to be for. I'm expecting about 2 hours or about like an hour 40 minutes is my expectation. I typically like these are not short videos, so like the 3 I have lined up, it's going to be shorter than the last time I did a marathon stream where I had like 7 videos to watch and they were all like 20-30 minutes long. I don't really have any other. Maybe if someone has like, oh, have you seen this really good like ID's video that I haven't seen, maybe. Yeah, this is going to be pretty much the same as the last batch of actually like the last 20 or so game theories have had Tom as a writing credit. So this is actually not going to be that different. It's just going to be a little bit more slanted towards whatever Tom's, because every theorist has kind of their comfort zone and like how they like explaining things, what concepts they like focusing on. It's going to be a little bit more slanted towards Tom's angle, and it's going to have Tom's voice, and that's going to be the main difference from like a normal video. Welcome, the man with a plan. Welcome, Alexandra. I think we should kind of just get into it now. I need to put on the screen. There needs to be visuals for the stream. This is not a podcast. Let's do some audio balancing first.
Family Diner. This.
Okay, that's gonna be a little loud for me.
Is where it all began. The animatronic empire, the string of deaths, and William's
That's already a weird. This is not okay. Whatever. How does that sound audio wise? Yeah, I don't think Tom's comfort zone is going to be very different from MatPat's comfort zone. I just assume, like, I think for FNaF specifically, there's going to be more MatPat influence than there was probably for most other series. Okay, that volume's good. Cool. That's just like the trickiest thing is like I'll get more comments about the volume than anything else typically if the volume is not good. Okay.
Sent into madness. Everything stemmed from this one location. Or at least, that's what we all thought. Until today.
I mean, this is one of those things I've learned with game theory, especially lately since they brought on more editors. The script will be correct in how they explain something. Sometimes the editor will throw in a visual that's not quite logical. Like bring up the murders. It's technically not wrong in that the first death in the series is minimum at Fredbear's, unless we're going to be doing something weird with Fall Fest, obviously. So the traditionally accepted first death is either the bite victim or Charlie, and both of those float around Fredbear's or in the Fredbear's era of the timeline. Yeah.
Internet, welcome to Game Theory, where it is finally time. Today, I graduate from FNaF boy to FNaF man and take on my very first FNaF theory. Although, I say that, I have actually been helping Matt write FNaF theories for the past 3 years.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
Have
Matt.
a safe flight back.
Bye.
I didn't get to talk to you about Gregory as a robot. It's all right.
Kids.
I mean, to be fair, that was both of our sin, but you know.
I threw something out, my first FNaF theory, I threw something out
Yeah,
there.
Gregory's a robot, first FNaF theory, and look how well received it's been.
Wait. I swear I've seen most things that Tom has been in. When was this one? Because I don't remember him being credited for Gregbot. Hello, Supersonic Rose. You like the theory, but it's explained a bit weird. What game theory lately hasn't been that for FNaF? Like, FNaF, it's been this weird, like, there's... When Tom's first brought on, you can kind of feel this learning curve of him helping with the scripts. That's what I think creates some of the... I think this was the peak of FNaF game theory hate for a while. Was early Gregbot... Like, it was weird, because it was like this valley. It was like this dip and rise. Where it's like, when it first appeared, people were like, holy shit, an explanation for Gregory and everything that happened to him. But then a lot of people really hated the Robot Kid concept. But it was kind of like we didn't have that many better options for a while. It just was... all we could do was argue against it. But there wasn't like a better alternative at the time. And then GGY came out, and then it's like that rebacked it, but also like kind of hit the requirement for the Robot Kid angle, and also the Mimic really hit the biggest piece, which was like the post-it room and the wall code. Both now have more Mimic-centric options to explain them, which were some of the best things that Gregbot had going for it. So it's like it was this weird rise and fall of quality. And now we're kind of back into like a comfort zone where it feels like Tom has figured out how to write game theories the way Matt Pet sort of did, but there's just still... FNaF has this a little bit where the explanation format is a little screwy at times.
Look how good that's gone for all of us.
It's done so well for all of us.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? But don't worry, theorists. I promise today's theory is way less crazy, hopefully. Because today, I'm going to be tackling one simple, teeny tiny detail that I think is really important to understanding this franchise. Help Wanted 2 was full of collectibles, most of which you get from a prize machine after you beat a minigame. Yeah. Some are set prizes that relate to the level you just completed, like a sun figure for beating the first daycare mission, or a meat pretzel for beating the Fazbear Theater. However, after you beat the game, there are some extra prizes to collect that are given to you at random when you replay a stage. Usually this is just extra plushies, models, or food. But sometimes you get posters, and one of these posters stood out above all the rest. It ends up on the back wall right next to the Faz Wrench entrance for the Princess Quest minigame. It's a poster promoting Fall Fest 1970. Now,
he's probably going to talk about this, but Autumn Arrives is the weirdest detail to me, because that sets it a little bit before Halloween, and Halloween is probably the only autumn evidence we have for FNaF 4. Being during like a fall era, is if it's Halloween, it's Halloween. If your clock setting is Halloween, it will become Halloween themed in FNaF 4. But Autumn Arrives would imply it's like earlier than that, which is weird. And also it's 1970, which is the bigger red flag. Doors open at 11 is also weird, but I'm assuming that's just like the buildings inside of like the festival grounds.
For the FNaF community, Fall Fest is nothing new. We first saw this name pop up almost 5 years ago in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for the original Help Wanted. A Halloween-inspired event full of attractions, rides, and of course, spooky versions of all our favorite characters to fit in with the Halloween.
Grim Foxy's the best edition of Help Wanted's Curse of Dreadbear. Like, Dreadbear's a great addition. I like him. And like the spookier plush babies are fun. Annoying level, apparently. I haven't played Curse of Dreadbear at all, by the way. I don't own Help Wanted, because I think I tried to get it at some point, and then I had to refund it because I did not have the setup for it. My computer wasn't strong enough at the time. Obviously, since I didn't stream, but I played through Help Wanted 2, I could do it now. But I just need to drop the $30 or whatever at some point. But I love Grim Foxy. I can't wait to put him in the FNaF TCG. I want to make the Jackos a more established archetype. I just need to figure out how.
Theme. But there is one crucial difference between this Fall Fest and the one we see on the poster from Help Wanted 2, the date. The banners around the Curse of Dreadbear hub world show that this event was taking place in 1983, but this new poster is from over a decade before. This whole Fall Fest thing has clearly been running for a very long time. In fact, it's been running since before the earliest confirmed parts of the FNaF timeline. In the Silver Eyes, when Charlie is looking for news articles on Fredbear's Family Diner, she starts the search at 1979, seeming to imply that this was when the diner was founded. But that is 9 whole years after this poster was published. And that's not all. Look at the design of this poster. While it's advertising Fall Fest, it's not inherently spooky like the event we see for the Curse of Dreadbear. Instead, it has autumnal elements, but it's mostly designed to look like an old two-toned circus poster, complete with a giant circus tent right in the middle. And this isn't the first time Steel Will has offered us hints that circuses might be important to this franchise. There's the mini-games in Help Wanted 2 like the Carousel and Blast. There's the circus costumes that are down in the basement.
Are they called circus costumes? I mean, I don't disagree, but it's like this is a varsity jacket, and the other's like only one of them is really circusy.
Ruin. There's even circus-themed Funko.
Yeah, this is a fair one to point out.
Clearly, Steel Will is beating us over the head with this circus thing for a reason. But why? Well, back in 2022, in the build-up to Security Breach's Xbox port, Steel Will did an interview with Game Jolt to talk about how they made Security Breach, give some updates on Ruin's development, and drop some little hints towards what might be coming down the pipeline for them and the FNaF franchise. And when asked what kind of game they'd like to make in the future, they said this.
One thing that I've always would love to do is get back to kind of like the origin of like Fazbear Entertainment, kind of see how things were made.
Same here. I'd like to.
Yeah, they've been talking about this kind of concept for a while. I don't remember this particular stream, but this idea has been toyed around for a while that they want to do a Fredbear's game and they want to do an early 70s era game, which is, I think, the most interesting thing to suggest doing a game for, because what the hell happened in the 70s to make it worth game-wise? Like, you can't really do one at Fredbear's Family Diner unless we're establishing there was something before the Bite and Charlie. Like, unless Charlie's the only antagonist, and that's assuming she died at Fredbear's, which I don't even think she does, personally. But even if she did, like, even if she did die there, it's like, what's your antagonist there? The one puppet? Why is Charlie even trying to kill people at this point in time? Because, like, I mean, Charlie has attacked people in FNaF 2, but that's already when, like, William has been, like, leaving bodies around the building, kind of, like, level of violence. He's killed 5 other kids. Charlie has a reason to start being aggressive. She doesn't really have a reason to kill people at random in FNaF, like, pre-FNaF 1 and 2. But yeah, I don't know what they would do in the 70s. It's an interesting concept. I just don't know what the gameplay would be.
To head further back into the 70s.
They want to create a game about the origins of Freddy's set in the 70s. Most of us at the time assumed this would just be Fredbear's Family Diner, but with all this circus imagery popping up, it begs the question, what if Fredbear's Family Diner wasn't the origin of Freddy's? What if instead it was this circus, Fall Fest 1970? And once I realized that, things started to fall into place. This poster is the key to clarifying some massive holes in the FNaF timeline. It confirms a number of things we've been predicting.
I don't disagree, but you're going to have to sell me on more than just a poster. And there's 23 minutes of runtime left, plus maybe 20 minutes because of ads. Because there's going to be like a theory. There's going to be, oh, hey, there's not a Theoryware merch thing. Never mind. This is going to be 23 minutes of explanation. My guess is, my prediction for the rest of this video would be that this is going to be I think the most I can think of for Fall Fest, personally. There was a scrapped Squawks cast. I almost made this a video, but I walked back on it because I was kind of listening back to the audio bit. I'm like, what the fuck am I talking about? My guess is this video is going to imply that, like, William and Henry wore suits, like fabric suits, and that's going to be connected to Glitchtrap. And that's going to be the start of the timeline, and then that's going to lead to the spring lock suits being made and the rest of the timeline. I don't know how we're going to work in a game worth concept-wise, or if we're just going to say it's the origin of the suits and somehow tie in the Mimic and Sun and Moon into that, because he just said like theories we've been predicting for a while. And one of their theories was that Sun and Moon and Mimic were in the early timeline.
For a while, and it shines a little more light on the franchise's latest villain. Come to think of it, maybe this isn't such a small theory after all. Whoops. So, you better grab your popcorn, theorists, because the show is about to begin, and I'm going to reveal to you the true origins of Freddy's. But just before we get into that, I need to talk to you about something else that's really important. It's something you may have seen if you watch our own sister location, Style Theory, but we have an exciting theorist event coming up. We are putting on a fashion show. It's called Creators in Fashion, and it is the first of its kind. Not just because a fashion show has never been done on YouTube before, although that is pretty cool, but because we're
support that, but we have like 3 videos to watch, so I'm gonna skip this purely because this takes up 2 minutes of runtime.
See you there. But for now, let's get off the runway and head back.
Have you ever read the Mimic? Yes, I've been reading more and more books of the FNaF, more and more of the FNaF books lately. A lot of them I've read, in quotes. There was a lot of skim reading I did when the books were first starting to really pick up in conversation. But I've been really just, like, sitting down, hunkering down, just, like, staring at these fucking pages. Reading more traditionally. Because the weird thing for me is, I can't read fast and absorb any real information, typically. I have to kind of do this weird jaunt where, like, I skim lines, and then really focus on stuff that catches my eye if I want to get any information out of it quickly. But if I want to really absorb the full book, I just have to slowly read page by page. And it's not a fast process. It's never been quick for me. The Mimic, I think, is one of the better ones of the collective FNaF books. I would say... It's weird. The Frights books kind of start strong with Into the Pit. It sets the standard that some of the later stories, from what I've looked at so far, I'm loosely going chronologically. But from what I remember of them, are really stupid. I joked about it on the stream before. The one where the kid turns into a Kids at Play sign. That, I think, was the series low, like the franchise low, maybe. I can't remember a story that was as fucking stupid and unlikable as that one. But the Mimic is one of the better ones. The Mimic, it's got its characters aren't just assholes for no reason, which is, I think, the biggest flaw in a lot of FNaF stories is they go for like this karmic angle where it's like, oh, this kid's likable, and this is the unlikable kid, and the unlikable kid's typically the protagonist, and then they do something that gets a consequence later in the story, and it's always way more extreme than the offense they commit. You'll be like, Foxy gave a cake to my friend and not me, so I'm gonna kick Foxy in the shins, and then I'm gonna be dismembered by Foxy. That's like this. That's kind of Step Closer, but that's not really what happened in Step Closer. I'm kind of combining the archetypes there. Oh yeah, I can't remember. Maybe the pizza theory or the pizza one. That one's pretty stupid. But that's, like, unique kind of stupid, because it's still Freddy's themed, it's still, like... And it's a little less blameful. Whereas Kids at Play, like, the main character is just, like, an asshole the whole time. And it's like, what the fuck was the point of this? There's no tragedy here. It's just a kid being a piece of shit driving a car too fast. And then that just somehow leads to him being possessed in the middle of night by supernatural forces and turned into a Kids at Play sign. It's like, and the Freddy's connection is so shoehorned in. Andrew Pizza is the theory that Andrew, the Stitch Wraith plotline, like, vengeful spirit of that plotline may or may not be in the games. That's the big debate right now in the Stitch with the Frights books. Is like, are these storylines in the games or not? It's a joke theory primarily. I haven't seen many people argue it in earnest. That Andrew was baked into a pizza, or like thrown into like the sauce and melted alive in that, and then was eaten. I mean, yeah. I don't remember Gumdrop Able. I remember the gun, like the. I kind of remember Gumdrop Able, but I don't remember like the details that well. Actually, now I think about it. Eleanor's cool, except for her being shoehorned in. Okay, Eleanor's cool, except for the part where it's like, and then you created the teeth for Glitchtrap Chamber, and then she was in 1:35 a.m., and then she was like, what? I thought that was Andrew's agony. Why is she there? Just to be like. Her contributions are like really ambiguous in some spots, and it's like, did you need to contribute? Like, is she just being a bitch? Is that like, I know she like feeds on agony, and that's like kind of the concept we're running with, but it's such a weird reveal to me because it's like, I don't feel like those stories really needed and then there was a mastermind the whole time. Like, they already set up an explanation for things. So it feels like to go into whatever. I'm getting way off track.
To the circus. Now, I understand there may be some hesitancy in me changing up the entire beginning of the timeline. I get it. It's a pretty big claim. And while there have been a number of hints towards circuses throughout the games and books, it doesn't necessarily mean that's where this whole thing started. So, let's take a look at one of the more recent examples of the circus being hinted at, so I can show you where I'm coming from. In the basement of the Ruin DLC where you find the Mimic, there are two costumes hanging up, an old lady blackbird and an elephant dressed as a clown. In the game files, there's also a lion wearing a varsity jacket. 3 animals all associated with the circus.
One animal associated with the circus. We're kind of stretching 3 animals.
Elephants often perform tricks. Lions were regularly tamed by lion tamers, and while crows or blackbirds aren't traditionally circus animals, they do often appear in circus-focused media like Disney's Dumbo. Plus,
we're really stretching that last one there. I'll give you a 1.5.
Elephant is
sure.
literally dressed as a clown. It doesn't get more circusy than that. But the most important part isn't actually their circus theming. It's the fact they aren't animatronic suits. In our initial theory on Ruin, we talked about how these costumes seem to be related to circus babies because, you know, circus. However, when Circus Babies Entertainment and Rentals, or even Circus Babies Pizza World was due to launch, they were all animatronics, and complex ones at that. Why then would they have physical costumes? They wouldn't, unless these costumes actually came from something circus themed that was before animatronics were part of this franchise. In the Mimic, not the robot, the Tales from the Pizzaplex story named after him, we learn of a character named Edwin who owns a robotics company, getting big off of making a robot vacuum cleaner. However, with the birth of his son, the death of his wife, and then the crippling pressure of running his own business, he decides to sell the company to none other than Fazbear Entertainment. Why does Fazbear agree to purchase? Because they want Edwin for his robotics knowledge. Specifically, they want him to turn their character costumes into full-blown animatronics. We've seen.
Okay, so this is already a Fred's or a Parallels kind of based argument and all, but this is a little weird in context with Edwin because it's implied Fazbear Entertainment already exists as we think of it at this point in time in the story, because they recognize the characters already. Like, when the Fazbear Entertainment team goes down, they're like, oh, that's Foxy, oh, that's Bonnie, that's Chica, that's Foxy, like, or Freddy. So it's a little weird context-wise, but sure.
Seen him do exactly this with Chica in the first few pages of the story. Later on, he goes on to explain that this is the 18th character he'd been asked to create, describing the collection as, quote, a circus-like array of animal and other character costumes. Circus-like, you say? We believed for a long time that Edwin is the book's parallel for Henry, the animatronic genius that helped Afton to grow Fazbear into the animatronic empire we know today. So the circus-themed costumes we see in the basement of Ruin likely came from that same time period, a period where Henry was transforming costumes in.
See, this is where like the parallel system kind of. This is why I talked about like the clues concept of making it less character based and more context based. Because we're starting to like. Yeah, Henry made the original animatronics, but it's like. You would think like. when Fazbear Entertainment's founded in 1983, and then as you point out in the novels, we have some hints that that Fredbear's Family Diner came out sometime before that. So, is there a phantom secret other Freddy's that's not Fazbear Entertainment that's getting these suits that are made into animatronics? We're kind of already being a little weird here.
Into animatronics. And these costumes aren't Henry's only connection to the circus either. When Charlie goes back to her childhood home in the Silver Eyes, she looks through Henry's office and finds an assortment of books that, quote, would have seemed eclectic to anyone who didn't know the man. There were books on biology and anatomy, some on human beings, others on animals. There were books about the history of the traveling carnival and of the circus. There were books about child development, about myths and legends, and about sewing patterns and techniques. There were volumes that claimed to be about trickster gods, about quilting bees, and about football cheering squads and their mascots. Most of these make a lot of sense. Things like anatomy, mascots, sewing patterns, it all ties into the idea that he was creating characters and turning costumes into animatronics. The books about child development either tie into the fact that he was catering to kids and so was trying to figure out how he could best serve his customers, or it's linked to the human anatomy books and ties into Henry creating robot versions of his daughter Charlie. But there's one selection that has always stood out as odd, one that I've never had an explanation for, and that is the history of the traveling carnival and...
I mean, I don't think this line in Silverized really is pointing to what Tom's going to say it was, because the traveling circus is actually a really important part of entertainment history. Like, the reason superheroes wear capes is because carnival goers and carnival like showmen would wear capes. So it became associated in the public zeitgeist in the 20s and 40s and that era of superhero comics that strong, like impressive people wore capes, right? So this is important historically for a lot of reasons. And also, if you're running an entertainment business in general, knowing why these certain trends and things appear is important. Granted, I could have a better explanation than Kira and Scott did when writing Silver Eyes, and maybe they were thinking about implying there was this circus history that Scott just had it in his notes that hasn't been brought up much until now. Yeah, Batman and Superman are the example of why, like, they are based on the strongmen kind of archetype of, like I said, it's not just strongmen, it's the in general concept of someone impressive and otherworldly that came from the circus that led to superheroes wearing capes. So, like, it's important. It's not just, oh, literally the history of the circus. But yeah, maybe Scott like just wanted Henry to be a circus goer and kind of added that into the story later on.
Circus.
Sure.
Why would Henry need books on that topic if all the work he's ever done is on animatronics and diners? He needs it because the origins of Fazbear are rooted in traveling circuses and carnivals. It was a hint as to the first years of this business. So, this circus, Fall Fest, seems to be where Fazbear Entertainment all began. But now the question is, who else was there? And I don't mean human characters, let's be honest, we don't have many of them that are actually important, especially not back in 1970. I mean...
Yeah, I doubt Mike... I mean, Mike might be like a 1-year-old at this point in time. For all we know. Like, that's... Age-wise, he's probably not... Or maybe 2 to 3. I think Fredbear's had to start with some level of animatronics, because it's always the deal with Fredbear's and Freddy's. If they had costumes before Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, we don't really know much about them. Granted, if we are going earlier in the timeline, we might see something like that. But who knows? We'll kind of have to see. This Mike Sprite's catching me off guard, because it's not a bad recreation of Mike Sprite. It just is not the Sprite, so it's kind of throwing me off.
Which of the Fazbear characters were part of the original roster?
Yeah, I assume, timeline-wise, Mike would have to be born either in the late 60s or, like, around 1970, 1971. To be a teenager in 1983.
As I've mentioned, during Help Wanted
yeah.
2, we get a number of minigames that take place in carnival-like settings, namely Fazza Blast and the Carousel. And it's the Carousel that I want us to take a look at first. The game itself is pretty straightforward, you know, when you don't have an Ash trying to desperately keep your microphone attached.
Oh my god!
But despite this, Matt did manage to notice a very interesting detail in the level's design. A random pumpkin, just sitting there, waiting to be thrown. I think we can all agree that pumpkins are something we specifically associate with Halloween. And
That is a good one. Sometimes the random detail callouts are kind of mixed, like the drawing of Helpy around the burning building, where I'm like, okay. This one's an interesting one, because yeah, why would there be a pumpkin in this minigame?
Event we know to take place at Halloween in this franchise is, you guessed it, Fall Fest. We even get a Halloween-themed version of Moon appear during the nightmare level of the Carousel ride. The Carousel is from Fall Fest, which means it's from the early part of the franchise.
Well, okay. Yes and no. It does likely mean it's from Fall Fest. I think it more likely means that Fazbear Entertainment just has never stopped doing Fall Fest.
But then, take a look at the characters that are used on the Carousel. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, which, you know, is what you'd expect. Except it's not just the original versions from FNaF 1. The one that immediately stands out to me is this white and pink version of Foxy. Funtime Foxy? Well, kinda. Because you might also notice it has a hooked hand. Something that Funtime Foxy is clearly lacking in sister location.
Yeah, it's Mangle. Or it's Funtime Foxy Mangle version.
However, there is a version of Funtime Foxy with a hook hand, and that's in FNaF World, a game that came out before Sister Location and doesn't have any other Funtime animatronics present.
Yeah, because it's fucking Mangle.
Funtime Foxy didn't originally belong with that group of animatronics, instead belonging to an earlier set, and this Carousel tells us
it's fucking Mangle. This is my favorite character. You can't be like, oh, what is this mysterious white and pink fox with a hook hand? Where did it come from? What? Its dialogue line says some things were never meant to last. Could that mean it was from an earlier Freddy's location that just didn't last that long? It's fucking Mangle. This particular Funtime Foxy, the one in FNaF World, is supposed to be fixed Mangle.
Exactly which group that is. The other character.
The theory has been like holding my attention up to this point. We've not had a weird point where I'm like, I disagree completely. There is no Toy Foxy. It's been weird, but it's always been Funtime Foxy since FNaF World.
Characters on this ride, besides Funtime Foxy and the original 4, all have rosy red cheeks, which aligns with the toy animatronics from FNaF 2.
Yes, that's
Toy
something I
Freddy,
pointed out for a
Toy
while.
Bonnie, Toy Chica, and Funtime Foxy. The toy...
Okay, this is not stupid. Take it back. Take back the XDs. Take back the laughs. No, undo them. Bring them back. We're not implying Funtime Foxy's some mysterious animatronic
version of Foxy. The toy animatronics being here feels wrong, doesn't it? The toys don't become a thing until 1987 with their special recognition software and new, more complex endoskeletons. They replaced the old withered versions of the original
It was just
Freddy,
over-explaining.
Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy from the original Freddy's. How then are they on a ride from 1970? Well, this is because I don't think the toy animatronics are meant to call back to the 1983 Freddy's animatronics. They're supposed to be referencing the original Circus costumes.
That's an interesting one. I'll give him that. That's an interesting concept.
Back to the Mimic story, once Edwin abandons the warehouse...
I still think we're kind of trying to prove the 80s animatronics, or the 70s animatronics, or not animatronics, the 70s suits exist. We're still kind of... We're still really clinging to Edwin to prove that one.
Fazbear employees are sent in to collect any Fazbear property, things like their costumes. One character mentions a few of them: a brown Freddy Fazbear costume, a yellow Chica costume, a Foxy costume, a Bonnie costume. The original 4 were all in existence as costumes.
It's worth noting, Phone Guy in FNaF 1 describes the shells of the suits as costumes, so this really doesn't mean the circus-y costumes.
Before their introduction as animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And what's even crazier is the designs of those costumes actually exist. A few years ago, there was a, let's just say controversial, but at the time, official FNaF artist that dropped an image onto the FNaF subreddit with zero context or explanation. The only thing we knew is that these images contained Scott's official copyright. These images were commissioned by Scott, which makes them as good a piece of evidence as any. And what are these images of? Versions of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica in a similar style to the mascot costumes you'd find at a theme park like Disneyland, all with large proportions and big round heads in order to have a human fit inside them. These appear to be the original costumes for the characters. And where were these costumes used? I suspect they were worn at the circus. Why?
I think we would need to see Mangle to really solidify this logic.
Well,
Yes, Lady
notice the
Fizzy.
bright red cheeks. Exaggerated features like big red noses or cheeks have been used by clowns and circus performers for centuries. Joseph Grimaldi is...
I'm a little hesitant to use concept art, because there's a lot of FNaF concept art we've seen across the years.
recognized as being the ancestor for modern clowns, and in 1802 he created the design for his most iconic character, Joey the Clown. And one of this character's iconic features was painted red cheeks. Similarly,
I mean,
Albert
yes.
Fratellini is known to have helped redefine a type of clown in the mid-1900s known as the August Clown, complete with the bright red nose we know today. Why did both these performers feel it necessary to have bright red features for the evolution of the clown? Because when the word clown was first recorded in 1560, it meant rustic, boor, or peasant. This often boiled down to one simple stereotype: the town drunk, who you would often see after he'd had a bit too much to drink, with a bright red nose and red cheeks.
Cool history,
This
fair
happens when your
enough,
body isn't
yeah.
able to digest alcohol properly, causing a release of histamines that essentially cause your face to have an allergic reaction, namely red cheeks and nose. The idea of referencing this was to make clowns or characters immediately look foolish, silly, or disarming. So people
Okay, now we're over explaining clowns.
would be quicker to laugh at them rather than be scared of them, which is pretty ironic when you think about it. That is why I believe these costumes are circus costumes. Not because they're trying to make characters look like drunks, that wouldn't be very child-friendly. It was to invoke those same reactions.
Yeah, did you really need to explain the history of clowns to explain that rosy cheeks are clown imagery? I mean, like, yeah, we all kind of put that together. I mean, I don't mind I know it's supposed to be educational. Like, game theory is supposed to be educational. It's just really random, like that.
Of silly, goofy fun. And the kicker is you can see this trait carried over into the most definitively circus costume we've got available. Elephant
Yeah, the
costume
one.
down in the ruined basement. Usually you don't get a chance to see them up close, but freeze the frame just right, or, you know, search the game files, and you'll find that although a little faded, it too has rosy red cheeks. So red-cheeked characters, like the ones we see in these
I feel like we're still lacking that definitive, this can only be from the circus and this isn't just a FNaF design scheme thing. You know? Because I never, like, the rock stars, I mean, Carney kind of has, and he's more or less a rock star. It's like, I feel like we've done the cheek thing enough times to the point where I'm like, this isn't a clown-only concept.
designs would have been right at home at a circus, which also opens up the door to other red-cheeked characters from this franchise to potentially be part of the original roster. Maybe characters that weren't originally animal costumes, but more likely humans wearing the same kind of face paint. Case in point, Balloon Boy.
Hello.
Balloon Boy has never really fit in anywhere. We turned on FNaF 2 and he was just there, and we've hated him ever since.
I said, read the.
But in Security Breach, he got his own arcade cabinet, Balloon World.
Yeah.
And if you played that game, you'd see a circus tent in the background. Balloon Boy's only standalone adventure places him at the circus. But while he never fit in with FNaF 2's characters, he did have a striking resemblance to a handful of characters in sister locations.
I think he would have more of a white clown makeup look, though. He's, like, he definitely is white, in quotes, or like that general beige skin tone, but like, these guys have, like, the white, pale clown aesthetic, like chalky paint kind of thing.
And circus babies. Other wooden puppets like the magician and fortune teller, all jobs that would be found at a circus. Selling balloons
Yeah,
was
it's
an
a circus-themed restaurant.
important part of any
Link. If he was a clown, this would be different. He's a kid with rosy cheeks, which is a separate kind of visual stereotype. You know?
Circus.
Like, you over-explain the concept of a clown, but forgot to include that rosy cheeks, especially in the 40s and stuff, was like a very like design thing for a kid. Like if you look up like a lot of like World War II kind of era like posters that have like children, they'll have like bright red cheeks.
So Balloon Boy with his little sign offering them to children would be right at home with the rest of them. And to top it all off, when Funko decided to release their new Circus line of FNaF products, it contained not just clown versions of all the characters, but versions of all of them wearing Balloon Boy's iconic outfit. We were being shown that Balloon characters, and specifically that outfit, are inherently tied to the circus. Balloon Boy has to be a part of this. Full for
Has to be? Maybe. This is one of the ultimate videos where it's like, this could be true in a way. At the same time, however, I'm waiting for that moment where it sells me. This is really like, wow, it got me.
This is where he finally makes sense. Another example would be Circus Baby. She's been showing up a lot in recent games, just like the circus imagery. So it feels like...
Baby just hasn't really left the series since she appeared. I don't know if that's like it's the circus is important now, as much as it is Baby's an iconic popular character and she always makes her way into something.
Steel Wool are purposely trying to connect the two. She's also got the red cheeks we've talked about, as well as that white face paint that we see on most traditional clowns. She'd fit right in at a circus.
Yes, it's Circus Baby's Pizza World. She's the clown girl. Does that mean every character is a clown? I'd argue not really.
Plus, you know, she's literally got circus in her name. Maybe this character, whose placement in the timeline has perplexed us for so long, belongs way earlier in the franchise.
You just said she should... Earlier, you said she shouldn't be early in the timeline because the animatronics, they would all be suits. They're not animatronics yet. This is really weird, like... walking, like, this is having your cake and eat it, which is weird.
Franchise's history than any of us expected. But above those two, in the books there is one other costume that gets called out. The core four, but always one more, a jester costume. Now, I'm sure Matt is once again freaking out because jesters aren't clowns and they aren't part of a circus, and dude, I get it, but just trust me on this. In that quote from the Mimic story about the rack of costumes, after listing off the main four characters we know and love, they finish off by adding, and bright pink, yellow, green court jester costumes, similar to the colors we see
this is not bright pink and this is not yellow green. Sure.
and Security Breach. Yeah, I know they're a little off, but they're pretty close. And
not really. And he's also got like, it's really just his feet that are gesture, or his pants have like that kind of clown gestury thing going on. I think you would need like I mean, this has gotten really big in recent years to the digital circus, like the big poofy two-tailed like hat that like Pomni wears in the Amazing Digital Circus, and as well as Nights in the Dreams, that kind of hat.
just look at the rest of his costume. Curly pointed toes with bells, puffy trousers, or pants I suppose, and the tutu-like frills on his waist and ankles.
Yeah, once again, you're really focusing on the
he is
pants.
100% meant to be a court jester.
Okay, see, this is what's kind of bugging me, is we're taking a lot of small details and inflating their value to be definitive. I think if this video was like, hey, we're kind of delving into some interesting kind of conspiracy theory territory, I'd be a little bit more open to it. And also it's worth noting it's an animatronic suit in the books. In Tales, the Jester costume is a Springlock suit, which does not really fit it does not really fit Sun's vibe or Moon's vibe, and it's also breaking the costume theory connection, kinda. And also I feel like we would have seen Sun and Moon earlier, and also Baby also has Jester influence in her design. She has like the kind of silhouette of a Jester at the very least. At least by this standard. If this counts as a jester, Baby counts as a jester.
He even jumps out of a freaking castle when we first meet him in Security Breach. And as Matt was very keen to point out, jesters originated as performers for royalty in their castles during the
And this is another thing, going back to clown history, jesters are like the prototype for what a clown will be kind of riffing on, and the clown will take advantage of like that medieval feel, that peasant, as he pointed out earlier, as well as the concept of like the entertainer. It's kind of it's the modern evolution of that concept for the masses.
Middle Ages. Finally, there's the epilogues, where the jester character once again returns, but this time we get a description of its mask. Quote, Lucia stepped up to the costume, suppressing a shiver at the jester's leering, toothy grin and its wide eyes. One of Sun's most distinct features is his obnoxious, toothy grin. It's so iconic that he had to have teeth underneath his teeth just in case. And those large vacant eyes definitely give off that leering.
I mean, once again, kinda. But the colors are wrong, and he's lacking the entire gimmick of his character, which is the sun and the moon
Vibe that Lucia was describing. So even though Sun doesn't have the red cheeks like we talked about, he still appears to be very obviously connected to the original crew, Freddy, Chica, Foxy, and Bonnie, as well as the Circus. He is the last one mentioned when they're all being listed off, as if the costumes were grouped together, like they came from the same collection of characters that came from Fazbear's circus days. Sun and Moon actually make a lot of sense as characters in a traveling circus. In the tale story, Bobby...
I don't even disagree with that per se 100%. I just feel like we're treating it as more fact than it sounds like. Oh, and also Ennard would count as like an early... I think if this video changed a few of its explanations a little bit to be like, there's always been a clown in the group, and Baby is just one of those iterations. And, like, for example, like let's argue there is, like, this pink and yellow clown archetypal character, and that's, like, in the early Springlock days. And then there's the Baby era of that, where it's like, oh, we have that clown. And then we have... now in the modern day, we have Sun and Moon as the new jester. Like, the idea that there's this rotating hat kind of going around. The torch is being passed from character to character. Similar to how, like, Roxanne and Monty have kind of replaced the Foxy archetype, and Monty was brought into the main band when Bonnie was just decommissioned. I mean, Monty was already there, similar to how, like, Music Man is not part of the main band of the Glam Rocks, but he is in the location as a separate character. Like, Monty was there, but he was not part of the main band. He was brought in to swap out for Bonnie, seemingly. So if it was argued more like Sun and Moon are the latest iteration of the Jester, I think I would get that a little bit better. That would come off a little easier for me.
We get a bit of much needed backstory on this character who just showed up in
He also has another backstory in was it Insomnophobia?
Security Breach, not matching any of the 80s-tastic designs of the Pizzaplex. It turns out they weren't always a daycare attendant, but instead a performer. They put on shows where Sun would be the hero, and when the lights went out, Moon would appear as the story's villain. That ties into the comedy and tragedy masks that we found in Ruin, masks that display Sun and Moon's face. So it would have also been an ideal performance to keep kids entertained at a circus venue. And later on, when the daycare was introduced, that same Bobby Dot story describes the daycare's design as a carnival-like space, hammering home the connection to the character's origins. And then the icing on the cake, during Hell Wanted 2, he is the one we face when we're trying to fix the carousel from those old Fall Fest days.
I can see it enough. I just think the way it's explained a little bit is a little weird. To imply that he personally was always there is a little odd. I think it makes more sense to say that there's always been a clown. He's been there
since the start. And when you think about it, in the early days of the franchise, when you're trying to keep costs down, buying a full mascot costume or fursuit from a trusted provider can cost upwards of $5,000, while costumes for professional jesters and clowns are typically just a few $100. Keeping
modern day maybe have we researched the value of a clown costume in the 70s?
costs nice and low when you're first starting out. It really feels like the Circus origin is helping characters that are out of place have a place to finally belong. Sun and Moon, Baby, Balloon Boy, all of them will be right at home here at the Circus. However, Fall Fest isn't just the origins of the Fazbear franchise, it's also the origins of William Afton's first major tragedy. Fazablast in Help Wanted 2 is a shooting gallery that matches the design of the hub world during the Curse of Dreadbear DLC. Dreadbear
We're going to imply the circus burned down while they worked there? Is that what we're going for?
even makes an appearance at the attraction. So, this attraction clearly takes place during Fall Fest 1983. However, the penultimate Fazablast...
So what was the payoff of all of this? Like, we've just had 19... Before we get into the William stuff, we have 19 minutes of talking about this place being the origin of Freddy's. Right? And I don't even 100% disagree or anything like that. I think it's actually a fair comparison and all, for the most part. There's some parts that stretch a little bit. But, like, what's the bit we're doing here? Is this really just for this last part? 'Cause sometimes game theory will do that where it's, like, a lot of setup for the real theory, and that's, like, here-ish. I guess the payoff is just that there was a circus before Freddy's.
The blast level ends with you shooting a number of rockets and popping all the balloon versions of the animatronics that appear. Doing so seems to cause a chain reaction that leads to the whole thing ending up in flames. And when you go back for the final level, the place is burnt to the ground. We see the same thing happen during the Carousel ride. As you try to fix it, sparks fly and the thing lights up, leading to the nightmare version of the level where the whole place is already ablaze. And if you go out of bounds during that Carousel level, you can see the red sky, burnt trees, water tower, and windmill that are all present during that final Fazablast level off in the distance. Steel Wool is clearly showing us that much like every other establishment in this franchise, this event, Fall Fest 1983, ended in fire. 1983 sucked for this franchise, but especially for Afton. He loses his kid to a malfunction.
I'm shocked we're not saying this was in the 70s and this was the first thing that goes wrong for him. Or, better yet, William is... Let's say, I think personally, what I would say is William works at the 70s era Fall Fest, right? And then they catch fire for the first time and they lose, like, everything. Traveling circuses are supposed to reuse stuff and reorganize all the parts. If you lose the circus, you lose your gimmick. And then somehow, maybe he's the ringleader. I don't know what he does at this point in time. Or maybe he just got in the right place at the right time, acquired these characters, and then he settles down in his home area, maybe where the place burned down, Utah. That would explain why it's Utah of all places. And then bunkers down and then hires a guy to take these old characters and company, and then that makes Fredbear's Family Diner. And then 13 years later, his company he's built up from the ground, like from the ground up, all falls apart in Fredbear's, and that's the real origin point, and it's just like this like collective thing repeating history. Oh yeah, we have to tie it all to the Mimic. God damn it, I just remembered he's here.
Functioning Springlock suit and his other son's negligence, Fredbear's Family Diner gets shut down, and to top it all off, he loses the thing that started this whole business, the circus. Steel Wool is all about a sympathetic villain backstory.
Try not to set out to make a cool looking villain. Go make a monster that have a reason for it. These aren't just like these supernatural forces that came out of nowhere to just hurt people and punish.
Hold on. I know it's two separate teams working on things, but hold on. Like I said, it's separate teams. It's separate teams working on the series, but Steelwool having the exact opposite mentality of what created Eleanor as a story plot point. Like, Eleanor is probably the single most evil and least sympathetic character possible. Now, like I said, Steel will have a very different mentality than I think the Frights books really had for the story. Okay, will care. I don't ignore the ads. The ads aren't real. Forget they exist. Will care is the theory that I think has gotten the most beating over time from people who disagree with it, because it's one of those theories that's trapped where people try to make an extreme version of it that William's completely sympathetic, and the version I think a lot of people actually argue, which is William has a motive to start the storyline, and that's become like mutated into like different versions, and it's really frustrating because it's like, yeah, I don't think William really cares about his kids on a personal, like, loving level. But at the same time, I still feel like their deaths and the shutdowns of Fredbear's and stuff like that would have an effect on him. He's a control freak. He's an egomaniac. And losing parts of your life, even if you don't really care for them as people, is still going to have an effect on you as a person. And it's like, that's a more complicated way to explain a character who has an origin story than I think the debates have really been. The Mimic has a sympathetic backstory, actually, I will say. Novel Williams, much less sympathetic than I think anything William could be in the games. Not saying William is 100% sympathetic in the games at all, but there's like points where I could see things having an effect on William. I could not see those same things ever impacting William in the novels, because fucking his story never fucking touches on like things other than jealousy and his weird sadism.
People, right? Like, there were results of other wrongdoing.
Adding a fire to an already pretty awful list of tragedy and loss, it would make it a little less surprising that Afton could suddenly snap and go on a murder spree. But this fire tells us more than just how this first chapter in FNaF history ended. It also tells us that there was one other character here.
Okay, I will say I do like the idea of Fallfest fire being what gives William a starting point, now that I think about it. Because that I've always liked when theories work on a ghost mythology level, particularly with unfinished business and reused curses. If William gained his power from a fire burning down a circus and that gave him control over the franchise, then that makes Fazbear's Fright burning down, as well as the connection terminated, the undoing of the curse, the fire that undoes the fire, if that makes sense, a burnout. The ultimate guide doesn't fucking matter. I'm just sick of it at this point, because every time I look at it, I'm like, for like any information, it's like, what are you? I'm gonna flip over to a random page in the Fazbear Fright section. All right. Yep. I just went to the first page of the Fazbear Fright stuff, and it calls Oswald's ball pit a time-traveling ball pit. It's not a time-traveling ball pit. Let's flip to a random thing about the survival logbook. Yes, released shortly after Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, the 5 Minutes Freddy Survival Logbook offered a chance for FNaF fans to put themselves in the shoes of a new night guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and reflect on their first week at the job. Then there's just kind of a description of like, oh, you fill out sections, and then there are also a few secrets hiding in the pages that can help solve the many secrets of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. I want to flip backwards a few pages. All right, to... Where are the novels? Oh, here they are. So, insight from the graphic novel specifically. Firstly, remnant is never mentioned in the original novels. It's worth noting, and it just straight up says it's a remnant in the graphic novel. And then, interior of an active secret Circus Baby's Pizzeria shown there. The scenes inside Afton's laboratory give fans an interesting glimpse at the specific process behind using remnant. They never mention remnant in the original novels. We just assume it is. And an idea of how Molten Freddy came to be. Just straight up saying it's Molten MCI, but then also in the same book saying we work at Freddy Fazbear's fucking Pizza with the survival logbook, right? So, how? Not only are we saying something that was in the novels was not in the novels. I mean, the remnant's kind of there, but it's not named yet. It's not the remnant we think of in Frights or in FNaF AR. So, if you don't understand Molten MCI, and you don't understand why this is a fucking problem, we can't have Freddy Fazbear's exist with Molten MCI the way that this is talking about. The animatronics can't exist while they're dismantled in another location, you know? Mike has already been through sister location when the survival logbook happens, which means sister location has already happened. But if the survival logbook is meant to be a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza specifically, like this book just fucking said blatantly, then it just doesn't make sense. The animatronics are reassembled and possessed again out of nowhere with nothing. This book fucking blows. Like, the more I've got into it.
Someone else present from the beginning
Mimic
that
time.
you wouldn't suspect. The Mimic. Yeah, I know, I was surprised too, but everything seems to be pointing to this guy being here since the earliest days of the franchise. We get a lot of different descriptions for the Mimic during the epilogues of Tales from the Pizzaplex. Sometimes it's a traditional endoskeleton, other times it's a spider-like mess of slimy black wire.
I mean, it does become a spider, but it's not this. But, sure.
But when we are first introduced to it, we're given one extra detail. A detail that I never fully understood. Quote, it wasn't just a basic metal structure. Its steel frame was contained within a building collection of metal rods and curved plates and an impressive system of ball joints and pistons. All of it was topped with a long, vaguely rectangular-shaped shiny steel skull. The skull was the only part that was shiny. The rest was dark and discolored, as if it had survived some kind of fire. That's a
Yeah, this is the burn trap line a lot of people focus on.
pretty specific way of phrasing it, especially when it points out that the head isn't blackened by the same issue. We're being given a clue as to where this mimic came from, because the other detail that's important to bear in mind is that quote comes from the very start of the story, when the endoskeleton...
No, I'm saying the visual, even the script is wrong by saying the mimic became a black mess of wires. It became a spider. It didn't become wire. It didn't become black tentacles.
And first arrives at the Pizzaplex. It was delivered to this location already burnt, which tells us that it had to be in a previous Fazbear fire, and I believe that fire was the...
It's actually a good point that the mimic can't be from FNaF 6's fire, now that I think about it. Because why ship it to it? If it was already down there in the fire location, that would mean someone took it out and then immediately put it back, which is kind of weird. For it to be from the FNaF 6 fire, which narrows it down to being Fazbear's Fright, which doesn't make any fucking sense. We definitely would have seen it if it was there. Or it is something weird that we haven't seen before. There's actually a little bit more to that argument than it sounds, now that I think about it. But I'm not sure this particular way. I don't think it was in Fall Fest 70, but...
fire of Full Fest.
It
But
is
what makes me so sure that
interesting
the
that it is.
Mimic got all burned during that fire specifically? Here's the thing. I know we always joke that everything in this franchise ends in fire, but we can actually count the number of fires on one hand, even if you're an animatronic with only 4 fingers, which means it shouldn't be too difficult to go through each one and determine which one the Mimic came from. Working backwards, there's a fire at the end of Security Breach if you beat the burn trap ending. Afton is defeated, the blob steals him away, and the entire pizzaplex catches fire and collapses. But as we've talked about before, it doesn't seem like this is the canon ending for Security Breach. We find Gregory's drawings for the non-canon endings during Ruin, and the last one we collect is his drawing of the burn trap ending, which means this fire wasn't a real fire. And even if it was, this ending takes place at the pizzaplex, so the Mimic couldn't have been delivered to the pizzaplex burnt from a fire, as the burn trap ending comes later in the timeline. Second option is the FNaF 6 fire, but once again we face issues with timeline. The pizzaplex is being built on top of the FNaF 6 location, which means the Mimic wouldn't be able to be delivered to that location when the pizzaplex is being constructed, like we see in the book, because it would have already been there. The only other fire left other than...
Yeah, it would require that someone took the Mimic out of there and then immediately put it back. Which is weird. And there really wasn't a point to explain it well.
Full Fest is the FNaF 3 fire, but the owners of Fazbear Fright seemed pretty stoked when they found their first working animatronic, Springtrap. Up until this point, they'd only had bits and pieces like a foxy head. So it feels like they'd have also made a pretty big deal of finding a Mimic.
Yeah, they wouldn't need Springtrap as bad if they had the Mimic. That is a fair point. This is good theorizing. Like, we're finally getting somewhere with this.
Location, even if they thought it was just an endo. So it doesn't feel like it can be that one either.
Yeah, just put a fucking foxy head on that and have that thing run around.
Which leaves only one fire for the Mimic to have been burnt in, the fire of Full Fest 1983, meaning the Mimic has been around for a long time. We actually theorize...
Maybe? It could be Fall Fest 70, it could be Fall Fest 83. It could also be that there's some event prior to Security Breach the Mimic was in that we haven't really been explained yet. I do agree that there is something interesting about it being burned. That does not really make sense with it being burn trap, because like I said, that would require they go down, find Springtrap, and find the remains of William, or at the very least, or at the very least, if it was in the fire at some form, if it was that fire, they have to take it out and then use it for other shit, and then someone ships it back down there for no reason, really.
This back when we covered Sun and Moon after the events of Ruin. We connected the Mimics thrown together, thin, simple animatronic design to that of Sun and Moon. Namely, a very weird but distinct feature, independently moving teeth. It's a strange design detail that we've never seen before. So for both characters to have the same detail...
I personally think this is just supposed to show how the Mimic is just a bunch of random scrappy parts. Is this hand? I don't think the Mimic's hand looked like that. That's fucking Moon's hand. He doesn't have Moon's hand. He has a blocky, like, bulky Endo hand, and he has Burntrap's hand. Or a Nightmare hand, I should say. This is not... Let me pull up this in another tab. I want to make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, let me pull up the... That's just... Oh, that's fucking... Oh, God, the perspective has killed me. Okay, so here's what... I thought this was his arm curled up, and this was a weird model. It's just fucking poor blending of the render.
In the same game makes it seem...
Sorry, that just screwed with me visually, like...
connected in some way. And if Sun and Moon come from the early Full Fest origins of the franchise, then the Mimic being around at the same time...
I know, chat's delayed, I figured it out.
There's one more detail that tells me that the Mimic has to have been around during the Full Fest era of
Yeah.
FNaF, something that's been right under our noses for years. For a while now, we've believed that the Glitchtrap virus in Help Wanted 1, the virus that takes the shape of a yellow bunny rabbit and takes over Vanessa's mind, isn't actually William Afton himself, but instead a version of the
For
Mimic
years with an asterisk, you walked that back for a while.
program that is mimicking Afton's behavior. In the game, we heard about Fazbear trying to keep costs down for this new game they're developing.
I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves. It was a budget thing, I guess. It was just junk, circuit boards and things like that. Looked pretty old.
That game was Help Wanted. It's an in-universe game that takes the original FNaF games and turns them into new VR experiences, which is exactly what we learn happened to the Mimic program in The Storyteller. Quote, "It's a simple template-style software that takes previously created stories and rearranges them into new scenarios for VR, AR, and arcade games. That is what Glitchtrap is. The Mimic program, having been scanned into the system, gets a crash course in Afton's
I feel like we're explaining this for like the 4th time lately.
murdery tendencies and is now mimicking it. Hence, he appears as Afton's iconic yellow rabbit. Except there's one part of this explanation that never sat right with me. If the Glitchtrap Mimic was learning about Afton from the in-universe games of FNaF 1 to 6, then why does he take this form? Afton in all of those games, even in the 8-bit minigames, is always wearing his Springlock suit, because that was the costume he wore at Fredbear's family diner. But the version of the suit the Mimic shows us as Glitchtrap is a completely different design, and at the time, we'd never seen this version before. This isn't his Springlock suit. It's a hand-sewn suit with plastic-looking facial features
I'm not going to interrupt yet, because we're going somewhere.
similar to the
Explain about
ones
this
we
build.
saw on that concept art. Those suits
Not really,
came
but
from
okay.
Full Fest, and so it would make sense
This is way more hand-sewn than those suits from Fizzy's renders.
for this hand-sewn golden rabbit suit to have also come from the same time period. But for the Mimic to have been able to copy this design, it would have to have some memory of this version of Afton in its memory banks prior to being uploaded to the Help Wanted game system. It would have to have observed Afton perform in this iconic golden rabbit costume alongside a golden singing bear at Full Fest. The Mimic would have to be around during the early costume days of the
it run.
franchise. Tape Girl did say the circuit boards looked pretty old after all.
It was just junk,
It's because it's from the 80s.
circuit boards and things like that. Looked pretty old.
Maybe the Mimic was originally meant to mimic Afton specifically. I'm not entirely sure of this, to be honest, but it does feel like
That saved this line. Just having the humility to say, I don't know what the fuck is going on here. That's more valuable than any evidence to me. The ability to say, like, fuck it, it's weird.
this is where the clues might be heading. Both Full Fest and the diner were open until 1983 after all, so they coexisted for at least 4 years, with the diner opening in 1979. And we know that Afton was performing as Spring Bonnie at the diner, so it's possible that the Mimic was part of Afton's plan to expand the business. He could literally be in 2 places at once. Eventually, the Mimic would be locked underground, with some circuit boards containing its programming set aside just in case. And when the Mimic software was finally used again to help speed up the process of a new VR game, it was shown all of those old FNaF games. And while it watched and learned, it recognized someone, William Afton, the golden rabbit from the circus. And so
Okay, that's... I'm glad I left the video here. Let me...
it decided to take on the form it remembered from all those years ago, creating the monster we have spent the last 3 games and 2 DLCs trying to stop. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory! Thanks for watching.
Okay, so that's... I need to think about that one a little bit. It's interesting. I don't know if I agree with the Mimic physically being there, per se. I think there is enough wiggle room for there to be more information than we've been given so far. I don't think the series theory sucks. I think jumping to that is a bit extreme in this context. I don't think that part fully adds up to me until I see more of this character. I think if we get a better look at the Mimic in an 83 context, that could really support that. It's just uh hmm. Yeah, I think this is a video. I think there's some interesting ideas in this one. Which I think if we're not getting like a timeline style video that's supposed to be a definitive version of the story, that's what a lot of these videos should give, is at the bare minimum an interesting idea to play off of. I kind of want to do a Fall Fest video now that takes some concepts from here and sort of takes different directions to them, because I don't think it all being in 1983 at the same time fully adds up. I think the core idea that there is this fall festival thing that caught fire, and that plays into the early days of Freddy's. I think that part's pretty fucking solid, to be honest. That part had the best evidence going for it. And I think the idea that the idea of the Glitchtrap being based on these old school fabric-y costumes is not that bad of an idea on paper. It just needs to be elaborated on more in game. I do like Chica being the first animatronic, or from a unknown other location being dropped, is the best thing to come out of this, and the fact that we haven't talked about Gregbot yet. Fall Fest is the new Midnight Motorist, but it's even less information because we don't have one designated thing to look at. It's a bunch of scattered things. Fall Fest is somehow straightforward, but it's also it's like Midnight Motorist in that it's currently the thing we keep talking about and keep throwing around ideas for, and nothing seems to fully click the way it should. I think that the only flaw with the Mimic physically seeing Fredbear's is it assumes it exists at that point in time, which we'd need to know for a fact it existed in the 70s first to before we make that theory. And secondly, we need to know that there is no other way to learn this information other than see it in person. If we ever get a look at what the indie games of the in-universe look like, beyond just the assumption that they're FNaF 1, 2, and 3, then that information goes down the drain. If we ever learn that there's like a glitched fabric costume running around in one of the mini games, or like one of the in-universe games, that's going to really kill that particular chunk of the video, as it means that was completely like a video game thing. Tails is weird about it, to be honest. Okay, we're gonna move over to RyeToast in a bit. I think we've talked about Fall Fest for a bit. Or I could end the stream here. I intended this to be a marathon of all of the videos, but I think we got a lot out of that one video already. I'm gonna let kind of chat stew on that for a little bit. The Mimic's emo because it felt like it. It's in a phase. Breadberry exists. I have no other thoughts. Oh, okay. This is series for sure. Oh yeah, it's like 16 minutes, and then there's going to be a sponsor segment in there. So, do we need to watch this video? I think this is a lot of generally accepted information. Let's just take a look at the RyeToast roster of videos. Are there any of these that I haven't actually watched this one? I just hovered my mouse over and it decided I watched it. Because it's like I haven't like watched some of these. I didn't watch the novel video because I kind of assumed what was going to be said in it. The special delivery one's good. Okay, I'll get that one loaded up. The Michael one, this one, I watched this one. I think I don't remember liking it very much, to be honest. Special delivery. They told us. Okay, so the special delivery one seems like. It seems like that one's coming up. So we're gonna watch that one.
5 Nights at...
All right.
Freddy's Special Delivery, the game with such a legacy that my speech-to-text that I used to write my scripts misheard me and thought I said 5 Nights at Freddy's Special Deliver, which, side note, that is my new Sonic OC. But Special Delivery was an AR mobile game that was criticized for being a bit too pricey and impossible to play in public. And by a bit too pricey, I mean incredibly overpriced, and technically you could play it in public, but the only way to play Special Delivery is to hold your phone at eye level and spin around in circles. And if you see me doing this at a public park, the cops will be called on me and I will deserve it. But recently the developers cut the servers to the app after a year or two of not updating it. So it's officially the first FNaF game that has lost media. You can't play this game. Sure, technically you could say FNaF World before any updates is lost media, but you can still download and play that version of FNaF World. Outside of a fan game that's recreating the gameplay experience and I hear is pretty good, I haven't played it yet, there's no official way to play 5 Nights at Freddy's Special Delivery anymore. It just doesn't work, which is a shame for the lore of the app. When I first wrote this video, I was mostly planning to recap all the lore and talk about how good the jump scares in the game are, and that was gonna be it. It was kind of like a final farewell to the game. But when doing research for this video, I had to watch a let's play of the only scripted, fully done content of the app, Dark Circus, a DLC for the game. And when I tell you what I found blew my mind, I'm not exaggerating. I legitimately think this app was telling us the future of 5 Nights at Freddy's for at least the next few games, and even some of the past. Enough teasing what I found. Slice is chock full of lore. I know, a game with Darkwater Endo as a character probably shouldn't be taken with the utmost seriousness. But there's a good amount of lore in here that I guarantee you've already heard from.
This is one of those things with RyeToast, it's a little hard to comment sometimes.
Other theorists in the space like FNaF. A good majority of this lore comes from emails that you can unlock by playing the game. They're not emails meant for the player, they're emails between employees of the company that made this service. Essentially, think of Help Wanted. In Help Wanted, we're playing a in-universe FNaF game made by an in-universe game developer. Same
music's going fucking ballistic right now, can you hear that?
Deal with Special Delivery. In fact, there's a lot of crossover. It's these emails where we learn about Vanessa and Lewis before security breach is even a thing. It's also where we learn how the Glitchtrap virus was consolidated, and so much more. I would cover all of the email lore here, but it's not really the point of today's video anymore.
Yeah,
Besides, it's been covered in plenty other videos.
Everyone's talk about
videos
it.
that are
It's
very
not
competent in
anything
doing
new.
so. Just know that this game is where those emails are from. And a lot of the community, myself included, just kind of nodded my head and went, okay, that's the lore from Special Delivery, and moved on. But that's not all. There is so much more lore in this game, specifically in the Dark Circus. It's one thing that never really got touched on in the main zeitgeist of the community as far as I'm aware. It was a paid DLC that boasted an immersive escape room experience. And as cool as a concept as that is, nobody that I knew ever played or talked about it. Mainly because it was a $20 expansion to a free AR game that most people had already stopped playing. It was also like 30 minutes of content for $20. Apparently, while the app was on the way out in the past few months, they switched it over to be able to be bought with in-game currency, but I didn't go back and play it. It seemed like a cool concept, I just didn't really have the time or feel like I needed.
I forgot this entirely exists, by the way. Like, I just don't even... what?
To, and I knew it existed. I just, I didn't play it when it first came out, so I'm like, yeah, why now? And man, do I regret not playing it. Not only because it does seem genuinely fun, but it is so goddamn hard to get footage of this DLC expansion, because essentially there's like...
Zaxel, can you just stop being like, oh, this thing sucks, and that being your only comment? I'm not a really fan of that approach, like, this thing just blows, and that's your only thing to say on the matter.
One really good walkthrough of exactly what to do, and they just do what they need to do and leave. And then there's Let's Players. There's not really good footage of like, here's this wall, top to bottom. Here's this wall, top to bottom. So it's hard to search these rooms. I've watched like 10 Let's Plays trying to get every angle I could out of this DLC. So let's go over the actual expansion and break it down. The Dark Circus opens with you in an escape room themed after Five Nights at Freddy's that seems to be in some kind of carnival. The walls are thin and wooden, and the floor is made of straw. It's very like built up to be moved around a lot. If you've ever been to one of those farms that do like hay rides and haunted houses during the fall and then take them down, it's that kind of vibe where it's definitely a shoddy building, but it's not meant to stay. The main gameplay of this escape room is looking for these fuse box looking things on the wall. Each of them need different codes, and the codes can be found in the environment. You're essentially trying to search through the environment to find the appropriate codes to use at the appropriate time. And then eventually, as you're playing, when you unlock certain fuse box lock thingies, you have to do a boss
I know it's
fight
Sonic music. I was just saying, like, wow, who really was going hard for what was being talked about energy-wise.
against one of 3 animatronics. First, Ringmaster Foxy, then Ballora, and then Great Escape Golden Freddy. The first 2 are on stages that are initially inactive but slowly become more active as more puzzles are solved. And the third one, Great Escape Golden Freddy, is fully within a water tank. You cannot see it until the final encounter. And then once you solve all the lockboxes and do all 3 boss fights, the event ends. And again, it's really cool. Not worth $20, but really cool. And this all seems especially interesting now with the discussion of Fall Fest being so important. This attraction lines right up with a Fall Fest, a fall-time straw-floored, thin-walled building that you have to do an escape room in. It's like a more involved haunted house. Casey, you're purring, but you're acting like you want to play, which means you're going to attack. And I don't want to be attacked, so if you attack, I am going to put you down. Be a good boy. I know you're kind of a bastard.
I know Rye meant put down as, like, put on the floor and let run away. But threatening, if you play with me, I will put you down to a pet, could sound so bad out of context.
But be a good boy. I don't know if y'all can see, he's wagging his tail in anticipation. He wants to smack. I'm not going to let you smack. And it's not that he's annoyed. Look at his ears. Listen to him purring. He's a baby who likes to play, but he's sharp, so I don't like to play with him. At least not with my hands. But this all begs the question, if it happened at a Fall Fest, which one? After all, the Fall Fests that we know for sure happened definitively were in 1970 and 1983. And it is a pretty safe assumption that it was a running annual festival from as far back as 1970 to at least 1983. We also know that in some way, Fazbear characters are tied to it. After all, Help Wanted 1, an in-universe FNaF game, features Fall Fest of 83. And there's posters in Help Wanted 2 associating Fall Fest with FNaF characters. So, did an escape room like this happen at an earlier Fall Fest? It seems likely, especially when you look at the poor fire safety of the place. All over this attraction are boxes marked explosives, boxes of fireworks, barrels of oil, flammable material, again in a thin wooden walled building with a straw floor. This place is almost cartoonishly unsafe of a fire hazard, and many people, myself included, speculate that a tragic fire occurred at Fall Fest.
Yeah, we
After
just
all,
talked
in the
about that.
games,
This is a
most
good
of
video
the
to
time
watch
that
after
Fall Fest is
Game
mentioned,
Theory
a
we just
fire
watched.
soon follows. Could this
I know this one came out
attraction
first,
be at
but-
the Fall Fest that caught on fire, and did this attraction start the fire? Well, as obvious as that seems, it might be too obvious. What I mean is that this all seems really intentional. This early in the timeline, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza isn't necessarily a scary place. With the evidence we have and the vibes we know, at this point in the timeline, it would be a kid-friendly place. And sure,
Yeah,
it's a Fall Fest, so some spookier elements are to be expected, but this place seems genuinely frightening. Intentionally so. I mean, look at Ballora. She acts like a spider, she's chained up, she crawls towards you. That's terrifying. Pair that up with the cartoonishly dangerous fire hazards all over the place, and it almost seems like it's a parody of what Fall Fest used to be, which lines up with how Fazbear is treating the history of the company.
I like that honestly argument. It makes sense in universe.
Think back to Help Wanted. We know for a fact that Fazbear hired an indie game developer to make games based off of what actually happened at Freddy's restaurants, specifically so that they themselves could release a VR game going, man, those are some crazy stories, right? Well, look, we'll enjoy the crazy stories with the rest of you, but just know they're crazy stories and we can move on after. This attraction would line right up with Fall Fest in the same exact way. It seems pretty likely that some kind of tragic fire happened at a Fazbear branded Fall Fest, and if Fazbear keeps trying to make light of the past so they can go back to their old ways, it would make sense if they're bringing back Fall Fest. And one of the opening attractions is an escape room where it's like, man, look at how creepy and fire unsafe we used to be. Pretty funny, right? So if that's what this is Fall Fest coming back? We've all been trying to figure
I do think there is something interesting to the Fall Fest and fire, and as they're talking about the narrative thing. Cat is just
figure out what Carnival is. Essentially, for those who don't know, obviously Steel Wool is still making future Five Nights at Freddy's games, and we're always going to try to figure out what the next one is going to be. Something that tipped a lot of people off in the recent Ruined DLC for Security Breach was this unused map with the note,
yeah, foreshadows. Are we getting a Fall Fest game like the first Fall Fest or the final Fall Fest? Honestly, FNaF, the final Fall Fest, would be a fucking awesome game.
quote, something cool that maybe foreshadows Carnival pending J-Top's thoughts. Add that to the Carnival-themed mascot suits in the Mimic Room. What I'm talking about, y'all see that? Add that to the Carnival-themed suits in the Mimic's room, all the Circus stuff with the Brazil ending and Balloon World and Security Breach, Circus Baby being relevant again, not to mention the Balloon Circus stuff that we saw from Funko.
We're definitely doing something with Fall Fest. Like, I feel like we brought it up too many times to go nowhere with it. The question just is, what are we doing with it?
All seems to be lining up like the next game is going to be something circus themed. I've been thinking that that circus carnival type game is going to be Fall Fest. And if we're lucky, one that's early enough in the timeline to give us some answers that we've all been desperate for. Maybe even the Fall Fest that had the tragic fire. But there's a thought that never occurred to me. I was talking to someone about this, and frankly, I can't remember who. I don't remember if it was a mutual that I was DMing or a podcast guest or somebody on Twitter. I frankly can't remember. So I just want to put it out there. Not my original thoughts. If it was a podcast episode, let me know in the comments. If you're a mutual and you told me this, yell at me in a DM and I'll put it somewhere. But somebody pointed out to me that if the next game takes place in one of the early timeline Fall Fests, what would be so scary about it? All the scary
Yeah, this has been a fair point for a while. That I mentioned this earlier in the game theory video. It's like, what's special about this point in time? That's like, what's the game? You know, what are you playing? What is the threat? What is the Freddy Fazbear? And that is a fair point to consider, because it's like, where are we going with this? What is so scary for this horror game right here? With the earliest we have a threat is Charlie, potentially ever, as far as we know, and maybe William. But William, if William had killed people prior to Charlie, it's not really been prior to Charlie or the MCI. It's not really been explained. So this would have to be new information.
Stuff in Freddy's takes place because of what happens during the timeline. So if there's a game that takes place before any of that, what's there to be scared of? And I hadn't considered that, but this idea would remedy that issue. If the next game Steelwool creates is Fall Fest, it could be that Fazbear is trying to bring Fall Fest back, and they're just making it overly scary to make fun of the weird stories that always got told about it. And if it is taking place further in the timeline, is Cassie going to be there? And if Cassie's going to be there, is she still going to be Cassie? After all throughout Ruin, Cassie's mind is being taken over by Glitchtrap. At least that's what it seems like. It seems like she's going to be the next Vanny. And
I've been hesitant against that theory personally. That Cassie's just going to be Vanny too. Like maybe, but I feel like we're going to have a conflict of interest as our main plot point moving forward. We have like Vanessa and Gregory, who are very against the Mimic and just want it gone and destroyed. They're going to be our kind of Henry stand-ins who want it obliterated. But then we're going to have our obvious antagonist in the Mimic over here, and then it's like, oh, it's obviously something has to happen to the Mimic, right? It has to be like taken care of to some extent, but is destroying everything really the answer to go with? Are Gregory and Vanessa's options of like dropping someone down an elevator really the best way to handle this? And then you have Cassie, who cares about the animatronics, who cares about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I just thought of an idea. Are we building to Cassie being the person to finally make a Freddy's that doesn't suck ass? I just thought about that. Because Cassie, one of her defining personality traits is that she likes the animatronics. She cares about the brand. She loves the company relative to what Gregory and Vanessa feel about it. I think the idea that when everything's destroyed, Cassie will be the only person to run a truly innocent Freddy's. One that just wants to take care of kids and just be a flashy, like a friendly place. If that's where we're going with her character, I wouldn't mind that. I mean, Michael did, but it was temporary.
all three
The idea, like... Oh yeah, she doesn't like Monty.
endings end with her still being trapped in that basement, so it's not looking good for our girl Cassie. I think it'd be a really fun and interesting villain to have an evil Cassie being taken over by Glitchtrap, but I only hope that they utilize her more than they did Vanny, because they barely utilized Vanny. Originally, that's where the script ended. I would have talked more about the...
Vanny is like the season finale villain who only shows up like when the plot really matters and is just put off to the side every other time. I think people just say like, oh, Vanny has no screen time. It's more accurate to say Vanny only gets screen time in the last end shot of something.
emails in the original script, but you know, I was happy with it. But then I did a little more digging, and things got weird. So let's start with an easy one, and then we'll go down the rabbit hole. First up, really quick, and whether you believe it or not, I think this is easier to understand instead of what I'm going to go into after. It's interesting that with a Fall Fest Circus kind of themed DLC, they have 3 animatronics, and only 2 of them have custom skins. We've got Ringmaster Foxy, which makes sense, Great Escape Golden Freddy, which also makes sense, and then it's just Ballora. I get it. On the face of it, sure, it's a dark circus. Ballora's already from Circus Baby's Pizza World. You don't need to theme Ballora into a circus. She already belongs to one. And I agree with you. Ballora does fit really well in a Circus Fall Fest themed setting. I think that's great supporting evidence for my theory that the sister location animatronics were originally characters in Fall Fest.
See, this is, someone pointed this in chat, but it kind of flew by relatively, that we can't just associate every single circus thing with Fall Fest. This is the video, I almost thought about doing a fair is fair kind of video. Like, if I disagree with RyeToast videos, they don't get special treatment over how I feel about game theory videos or FNaF videos, where sometimes I'll make a video talking about the flaws of them. I'm thinking about doing one for this one because I do feel it's a dangerous assumption to assume Circus automatically means Fall Fest. I feel like that goes a little far. I feel like we had a circus theme group, and then we're having a separate circus theme group, and as time goes on, they might collide more and more. But I don't think that means they all start from the same ground point. It would be different if we saw a fabric version of Ballora's costume, or like a proto Ballora, something like that, that implied if it's circusy, it must be related.
Fest. Just some food for thought and a primer. If that seemed too far-fetched for you, you might not like what I've got cooking up. This is going to be a stretch, and not necessarily a good stretch.
Like I said, the humility to acknowledge something's bullshit or insane, but is interesting to talk about, is more valuable than just saying information, I think.
Stretch that makes you feel better, but it might even be a bad stretch that locks up your thighs and make you fall on the floor. Even Casey doesn't like it. My guy Mark does though. Full disclosure, this might lead nowhere, but it might give us some answers we've been desperate for. And it all starts
This
with
is
great
one chunky cat. My grandma and grandpa used to have a cat named Thor, who was like this, but like weirdly muscular for a cat. He was huge for a cat. Like, he was larger than a lot of small dogs. They just weren't.
Escape Golden Freddy. Look at this model. It's crazy good. And by the by, I can only fully show off this model in a good way because of a fan render. There's, as far as I'm aware, no good screenshots on the internet in-game that show the full model of Great Escape Golden Freddy. This fan render is actually by Charlie's Suntime. Anyways, at first glance, this seems incredibly normal. After all, escape acts and escape artists are incredibly common features at circuses and carnivals. This skin harkens back to the idea of Houdini tying himself up and hoisting himself upside down, or sometimes even submerging in water to escape. But it's really notable that they chose to have Golden Freddy in a tank of water. Golden Freddy is drowning. Drowning has an interesting connotation in Five Nights at Freddy's. The first one that comes to mind for me is the most recent example I can think of, the story from
I know where this is going. I know where this is going. Yeah, always, if you're going to use a model for someone, always credit them. That is the 100% rule of FNaF, is either stick to the game files, because there's like, you can find on Reddit, the technical FNaF, they have the mega dump of pretty much every game asset you would ever need. And that's what I use for my models. Whenever you see models stuff, I either draw my own pixel art for them, maybe do some basic art for stuff like the Stitch Wraith, where I kind of drew it, or use the official renders and stuff. Yeah, it's drowning time. We're gonna just use a lot of water in Cassidy and Golden Freddy and imply Cassidy was drowned, which I don't see how we get there. Oh, what? No.
might even be a bad stretch that locks up your thighs and make you fall on the floor. Even the bottom of Great Escape Golden Freddy. This fan upside down. Outside of it, or a recent example I can think of, the story from Tales from the Pizzaplex, Drowning. It's one of those stories that does feel mostly separate from the book continuity, as it doesn't really affect things outside of it. Essentially, it's about a girl who gets trapped in a VR water park experience, and some spooky ghost girl that looks like she's drowned keeps trying to pull her into the water. Eventually, she succumbs to it and drowns in-game and dies in the real world. It's a really good story and one of the more well-written ones. Honestly, one of my favorite Tales from the Pizzaplex stories.
Yeah, it's not a bad
really
story.
Nails that sense of dread. But it became a lot more interesting when people were considering whether or not the drowned ghost girl is Cassidy, the vengeful spirit, the one many think is in Golden Freddy. Admittedly, there's not an amazing point of evidence that proves this, just a lot of circumstantial evidence that kind of fits the vibe. At some point, our main character says she used to play Save the Princess, which then somewhat loosely associates
That's just not correct information. Save the Princess is not a video game. It's an archetype when... Is Kara the name of the main character, or is it Peggy? I think Peggy is the one that drowned, or is implied to drown. One of the two girls. The names swap around in my head because fucking how confusing I got talking about the two. the main character states what she's thinking about is she's talking about, like, all video games have an objective typically, for the most part. And she's listing examples of what kind of things do players do in video games. And she's thinking of, like, stuff like you save the princess in a game, you find the treasure, you escape a maze. She's not referencing video games she personally played. She's referencing the archetypes of video games. And that's a crucial difference from save the princess to you save princesses in video games. What do I do to escape this?
Story, and Cassidy is theorized to be the princess in Princess Quest. Her physical description kind of a little bit matches other physical descriptors we've seen in these games, especially if this girl from the logbook is supposed to be Cassidy.
I have a 9-minute conversation about this image in the next video. The next video talks about a lot about Cassidy receiving Happiest Day and the things I don't agree with it. And I am very against this image being of Cassidy. Just heavily. And like I said, I have 9 minutes of fucking rant about not liking this association, personally. I feel like there's just it does not make sense from a narrative standpoint. By narrative, I don't mean the in-universe FNaF narrative, like the story of FNaF. I mean, people have to create this image. People have to make this asset, and it has to be passed around. And later, those people in the same circle have to make other assets for FNaF. And I just do not think this was ever intended to be Cassidy. I feel like if you're going to argue this is Cassidy, it's just as likely it's Charlie, is something I would like to point out. It is not at all blatant. It's stupid from a design standpoint for this to be Cassidy. Because it requires that no one has ever referenced this image again. Like, imagine if I commissioned art for a character, and then every time that character appeared, I just never described it like the commission again. That is one of the points I point out in that fucking rant. And also how, like, it's the most generic. Fucking, just wait for the video. No, you'll see. You'll see! You don't understand! I understand it all! Says drunk, exaggerated sire squawks in the corner. I don't drink. The FNaF point is kind of what I talk about, how silly it gets when you start arguing the logic the way it's built for Cassidy.
Which I'm not fully sold on. The fact that the girl drowned at all, which we'll get into in FNaF World. And mainly the fact that there is a spirit of a girl in the digital space of the Pizzaplex. If that's not Cassidy, who else would it be? Because it doesn't feel like Charlie, because that's not really how Charlie acts. So some people thought, okay, the vengeful ghost girl in the mechanics of the Pizzaplex is the vengeful spirit. She's still stuck to William Afton, so she ended up here. And with that same thought of Cassidy being one of the main contenders for the spirit within Golden Freddy being locked up inside of a tank of water is incredibly noteworthy. Not to mention, in the story Drowning, our main character eventually ends up in a house that is implied to be where the girl grew up at, and eventually she finds the girl inside of the bathtub. So in a way, the story is implying that this girl might have drowned in a bathtub. And what do we find in the Dark Circus? This seems to be bathtub. Now pause. I know this could just be like a boat for like a Love Boats ride or straight go-kart that just looks weird. It could be a lot of things. There isn't great footage on this because there weren't any.
Why would there be a Fazbear Entertainment branded bathtub?
Codes in it, but it does kind of look like a bathtub. But this isn't the only other reference to drowning in Five Nights at Freddy's. Both FNaF World and Ultimate Custom Night.
This is the better one to connect to, I would say. I still am not sold on this being Cassidy. I feel like context-wise, it's a little weird, but sure. This is the better one.
Same Old Man Consequences area with a red lake. In both areas, you can glitch your character into the lake to get some kind of secret. I believe in Ultimate Custom Night it crashes, and in FNaF
The girl in the logbook does not have yellow hair. She has, like, a couple yellow beads in her hair, but also has, like, a blue shirt you can barely see.
World, you get this ending. Either way, though, if you do it in Ultimate Custom Night, you still get the achievement in it for FNaF World. It's one of those things that weirdly connects FNaF World and Ultimate Custom Night. There's a few. But again, if the Vengeful Spirit is the one doing Ultimate Custom Night, and if Cassidy is the Vengeful Spirit, this is once again an instance where you're drowning Cassidy. So again, these themes of Cassidy, Golden Freddy, and drowning keep popping up. None of them entirely convincing, but all of them interesting. And I thought those were the only ones, but actually on a recent podcast episode with Oof Troop, they pointed out this.
Because a big mechanic in Ruin is like Cassie like goes into like an AR world and like can go through like glitched objects to essentially teleport, which is how you move around in FNaF World.
No, that's a great point.
And like she gets deeper and deeper and deeper down into the Pizzaplex until she gets to the Red Lake.
I never connected the fact that the lake in Ruin is red.
Yeah, it's a red lake, and it has dead trees surrounding it.
Huh. But that's not all. That got me thinking a lot about Ruin. And what's the first thing you see when booting up a copy
To be
of
fair,
Ruin?
I think Ruin is just related to FNaF World in general. I don't know if that's a Cassidy exclusive thing. Because we have Tangle, we have Prototype, we have, as mentioned, the Red Lake deep down to the lowest point. We have glitching through objects on the flip side. And we do have trees surrounding the Red Lake, and we have Old Man Consequences now.
This statue of Freddy is toppled over. Mind you, this is a statue of Glamrock Freddy, but it is still a statue of Freddy that is golden. It seems like workers tried to pull it up out of the pit that it fell into, but they must have given up halfway. So one of the first set pieces you see in Ruin is a toppled over, broken golden Freddy wrapped in chains.
I don't know, like I said, I don't know if this is a Cassidy exclusive concept or if we're just referencing FNaF World, but it is interesting.
And what's the last
that lake
thing
was
you
red.
see in the
Yeah,
Dark
you
Circus
might be
DLC? A toppled over, broken golden Freddy wrapped in chains. This blew me away. But there admittedly is a really important question that I am failing to answer. What the hell does this all mean? There's a possibility that it doesn't mean anything. This could just be a series of coincidences and I'm squinting too hard at it, and it's...
I don't think it's 100% coincidence with the FNaF World connections. It feels like we've had too many FNaF World references for it to be nothing. I think it's a coincidence for... It's interesting because a lot of people... What I did see once or twice passed around that RyeToast was saying Cassidy was drowned by William personally. I don't... That doesn't really...
At best an Easter egg, but I feel like it has to mean something.
Unless this
the only
happens
thing
in
I
the
can
last
think
eight.
of right now that would make some modicum of sense to explain all of these plot threads is the reason Cassidy is the vengeful spirit is because instead of just killing her like William Afton did the other kids, he specifically drowned her. And a death that frightening and that painful is what made her so vengeful in the first place. But that doesn't feel right. Something doesn't add up there. Scott is
Why drown? Where drown? How drown?
always been very responsible when talking about like the victims in FNaF and never really delving into the details of what William did to them. It's always been very like, oh, he killed them, period. So to have an important plot point be the method of how he killed one feels off. Not only
I don't agree with that logic. I think Springlock Cassidy has like a very much argument, and it's very FNAF-y as a way to kill someone in a brutal way. But drowning is random. Like there's no. This is a very relaxed cat. Honestly, the Red Lake being a pool of blood, like not literally, but like metaphorically, I think is a more interesting way to take this. The idea that if Cassidy dies the slowest and most painfully, right? free of Springlock Cassidy, and the blood trickles down, and they're left in the safe room with all the other kids whose blood would pool. That, I think, is how you get a red lake. That is how I think I would explain this, rather than I was drowned by William. It's a brutal image. It's dark as shit. But then again, the Springlock failure concept in general is dark in the series. And then again, tormenting someone in an underground bunker room or something like that is fucking brutal. And then again, the scooper system, when you remember that all of these animatronics can feel pain and are consciously being ripped apart mentally, is fucking brutal. Yeah, exactly. Actually, there's something interesting going on with that. You know how I said William's journey starts and ends with fire? Does Cassidy's journey start and end with water? That might be reaching too much.
Not only that, but if William Afton drowned Cassidy, where the hell did he do it? Does Freddy's just have a bathtub in the safe room? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So that feels like a departure from the franchise, but I can't think of any other explanation for why there's all this drowning associated with Cassidy. So that's where I'm leaving the theory for today. Here is all my evidence and all my findings and all the information I could think of. What do you think? I desperately want to hear y'all's thoughts.
I think I want to do a Fall Fest video now. I feel like it. I don't know what I'm going to write for it, but I think there's some interesting ideas there. I think this is a good endpoint. I think the books are kind of self-explanatory. I think, yeah. I have to figure it out what though. I have to figure it out though. I can't just like this is not one of those videos I could just write right now. I need to think about it more. I need a script for it, and it's not right there yet. I think this is a good point to end the stream. I think we've watched a good enough content, like a good amount of stuff. These were two videos that were good to watch back to back. Mimic Bath Arc and the official Fazbear Entertainment branded bed or bathtub. I think, yeah. Thanks for watching, everyone. And I will say,